and welcome to Early Childhood Ireland's podcast. Our podcast features interviews and discussions on all issues relating to quality early learning and care, with a range of speakers who are leaders in the areas that matter to Early Childhood Ireland members. I'm Maura Corbett and I work with Early Childhood Ireland. So in this series of the podcast, we're looking at the area of wellbeing. As we all know, Ashler's theme of wellbeing is about children being happy and healthy. So in this series, we're looking at all aspects of this. And in this particular episode, we're going to look at children's movement behavior and how and why that matters and how we can encourage children to move more. So my guest for this episode is Christina Duff. So some of you will have met Christina before as part of our Kids Active program. She's a children and young persons physical activity, health and play specialist. She's the school's physical activity coordinator at the Irish Heart Foundation, and she holds a BSc in sports science and health and an MSc through research in early years physical literacy from DCU. As part of her master's research, she worked with us, as I mentioned, in a joint initiative between Early Childhood Ireland, the Irish Heart Foundation, DCU and UCC to develop and evaluate the Kids Active programme and active play and fundamental movement skills for children in early year settings. She has spent much of her career working with children, and along with all the sports qualifications, she also holds a QQI level 6 in early childhood care and education. She's particularly interested in the role of child-led play in children's well-being, and along with all of that, she's Ireland's only licensed PARS play work practice trainer. So Christina, you're really welcome.
Thank you, Maura. I'm delighted to be here. I'm really thrilled to get the invitation. It's a great podcast.
Great. Well, thank you so much and you. It sounds like you're so busy. We were chatting there before we hit record, and you're really busy. So before we go into looking at the Ashler end of well-being and the movement skills and physical literacy and so on, because there's so much to talk about. Can you tell me just that last bit of the intro, the PARS play work practice trainer? What does that involve?
So it's PARS. So it was developed by a lady in the UK called Dr. Shelley Newstead, who is a playwork practitioner. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with playwork as a profession. So it's evolved in the UK over years on adventure playgrounds. So it's very much around child-led play and the adult role being more stand-off. So it's not structuring activities, it's very much facilitating rather than leading play. So Shelley did a lot of research into playwork practice and basically developed this model of a way that adults could kind of use playwork within their practice, whether it's in early years or schools or after schools or different settings, and make it really kind of practical and really adaptable to different contexts and different scenarios. So it's kind of like a framework for practice. It's sort of a way of thinking. It's a really, really interesting model and really, really interesting training. So I'm hoping to do a little bit more with that over the next couple of years, because it's a really, really kind of usable way to kind of put parts of play work into your practice within a kind of, early years or school context. So yeah, PARS, it's going to be huge.
Okay, great. That sounds really interesting. Sorry, and that wasn't part of what we chatted about covering, but just when I saw it on your bio, I was interested to hear a little bit more. And you never know sometimes with these initials, is it like PARS or PARS? So I got that wrong. So Christina, looking at the Ashler aim and learning goal about children being as healthy and fit as they can be, it talks about coordination, children's changing and evolving abilities, growth and fine motor skills, and positive attitudes to exercise. So can we have a look at those aspects of Ashler and coming in to talk then maybe a little bit about fundamental movement skills, what they are, and why they're important, particularly in the early years. It's that whole idea with physical movement skills that it doesn't wait, that the early years are so fundamental to the development of those skills.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, children are learning through movement all the time from the moment they're born. It's how they're interacting with the world. It's a hugely important topic.
So can you take us through what the movement skills are, and how we can support them in the early years, why they're called even fundamental movement skills?
Yeah, absolutely. So the fundamental movement skills are they're kind of a collection of different quite simple movements. So things like running, jumping, throwing, catching, skipping. And they're all kind of seen as these things that once you master a specific skill, you can then combine it with other skills, and you can do them in more kind of complex and challenging ways. So they're seen as kind of like in terms of physical literacy, if you think about actual literacy, if you think about the alphabet. So when you're learning about reading and writing, you learn the alphabet first, then you can put letters together to form small words, then you can go for more complex words, you can go for full sentences, and then you have books, magazines, articles, whatever you want. And fundamental movement skills are kind of like that. They're like those first kind of little bricks in that wall that you can build up and make these really strong foundations. So they're seen sometimes kind of as quite sport specific, but they're not really. They're basic skills that children use a lot in play and a lot in just general movement. And generally, they're kind of one of those things that research shows that if you've developed them quite well, you're much more likely to be active through your life because you have these opportunities. Once you use those skills, or once you have those skills, you're able to use them in different ways. And then it comes into kind of the social part of it, where if you have those skills, you're able to try these different things. You're able to find things that you like. You're able to find things that you find your community through. It's not just sports. It's all activities and all physical activity for your whole lifelong well-being.
So, you mentioned things like walking, running, jumping, using a ball, and so on. So thinking of the different ages and stages, and we will come to older children a little bit later on, but thinking of maybe, the 12-month-old who is just moving from crawling to walking, and onwards through the preschool years, then under 6. Can you take us through how we can support the development of those? Because unfortunately, we can be very risk averse. And in fact, well, in my opinion, that aversion to risk can actually hamper the development of fundamental movement skills. Would I be right in thinking that we need to get over that risk aversion to encourage children to be more physically active?
Absolutely. No, I do agree. I think part of developing movement, part of developing emotionally is kind of figuring out your own body and kind of what you can do, what's a challenge. And the only way to really understand what how much you can do is to challenge yourself. And sometimes that does involve maybe falling over and grazing your knee, or maybe it does involve kind of, trying to skip and tripping and falling over. And yeah, I think the risk aversion can be a huge challenge, because I personally know a lot of children who they're not used to falling over or getting hurt. And there's just such a disproportionate reaction when they do, because it's such a foreign concept that they just don't know what it is. And I think, yeah, we do as adults, especially when we're, in a childcare setting and we feel these children are in our care and we need to do everything we can to protect them. It can kind of hold children back from being given that permission and that opportunity to actually use these skills and go off and run around and climb things and jump off things. And yeah, play with some kind of element of gentle risk can be really beneficial as well, because you know yourself, like it is learning your own boundaries and figuring out exactly your own kind of challenges and what you can do. But in terms of young children developing movement skills, There is some quite good leaflets and literature around this from the HSE. So there's the active play every day leaflets. There's one for 0 to 3 and one for from 3 to 6. And you can find them on healthpromotion.ie. So that has some really good recommendations for younger children around things like tummy time and the sort of movements that you should be kind of encouraging, and the sort of stimulation around them, and encouraging them to reach for different things. Then as they kind of get to sort of walking and running, there's a lot more options and opportunities. And I mean, one of the things that I would always recommend for any type of physical activity or child-led play is things around like loose parts. I love loose parts. I think they're the best thing in the world for physical activity, amongst other things. So to have things around.
So with you on that, they're amazing. They're
yes.
And so often free and found, and interesting from a sensorial point of view and texture, and yeah.
Absolutely.
Big
You
fan,
don't need
big
a
fan.
big load of PE equipment for young children for them to be active. There's a term called affordances, and I love thinking about affordances. I think this is like the key to helping children to get moving without actually being like, you need to get moving, here's what you're going to do. So affordances are these kind of things within the environment, or things that are designed that just call to you to use them a certain way. So an example of like a manufactured one would be a big red button. You look at a big red button and you go, I want to press that big red button. You know exactly what you're meant to do with it, and you're called towards it. So things like, I don't know if you've ever seen a big green hill and said to yourself, oh, that'd be perfect to roll down. Or you see a big puddle and you go, oh, I want to jump in that puddle. Or even seeing something that's around kind of like bum height that you automatically go to sit down on. And things like that, they're all affordances. I think affordances is a really boring word. I like to call them things that are able, so things that are jumpable, splashable, rollable, kickable. And I think if you bear that in mind when you're looking for kind of loose parts and things to have in your home or in your service, what is throwable, what is catchable, what's jumpable, what's balanceable? And of course, with loose parts, you're not necessarily going to be the, the one who decides what these things do. But in terms of being creative and figuring out what you can have around the environment to encourage children, it's stuff. When it comes to fundamental movement skills, the research does show that there is a certain amount of kind of instruction or guidance that is needed to develop these skills sort of optimally. So what I would recommend is, if you're introducing these sort of skills, is to maybe do a little bit more structured stuff and kind of show how you would. So say if you're throwing, show how you would throw something, throw a number of different objects, kind of observe the different things that your body's doing, and help the children to kind of see what that is. And then let them go and do that. Not that you're kind of scheduling in 3 times a week, we're going to do fundamental movement skills, we're going to do throwing this week, and then we're going to move on to another thing. That you're actually showing them the things that they can do, and then giving them the opportunity to gravitate towards doing that thing in the way that they want to do, as part of their own free play with their friends or on their own or whatever it might be. And if they have those affordances and those loose parts in the environment, they will gravitate towards doing those things, and they will start to throw and catch, and they'll be practicing without it, being something that you're telling them to practice, which is the absolute optimal.
So basically, it's about having the equipment in the environment, and the adult knowing that these things are there to be thrown, or to be caught, or to be balanced on, or jumped on, or whatever, and doing your risk assessment as you go, that there are challenges in the environment, and not hazards. And I suppose separating out that everything challenging isn't hazardous, and you make sure there are no hazards, but make sure there's plenty challenge.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the difference between hazards and risk is not well understood. I mean, anything can be a risk. Like I have a photo frame beside me which could fall off at any moment. That's technically a risk, but it's not a hazard. It's not dangerous. And it is really important that, yes, we risk assess. We make sure there aren't dangerous things like loose nails and things that shouldn't be there. But we don't necessarily need to flatten every piece of ground to make sure that it's not uneven or trippable. It's the environment, there are always risks, but they're healthy risks, they're exciting risks, they're good things.
Yeah, it's the example that I've sometimes used is a branch. So a branch in itself provides challenge. It's a hazard if it's rotten, and then you need to get rid of it. So you check it frequently to make sure that it's sound, and then it's perfectly safe for children to balance on or climb over or sit on, and just one branch can provide all those affordances that you mentioned, but you make sure that it is safe and fit for purpose like that, but that you don't remove it just because it's a branch that somebody could trip over.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
One of the things in Ash there as well then is that idea of the positive attitude to physical activity. And I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and there were two people talking about hockey in it and hating hockey in school and wanting to be out on the wing where there mightn't be too much to do, and that. And you mentioned as well about it not being sports specific. Have you any thoughts on how we can maybe encourage educators who may not have had, who may have felt that the only way, that we bring our own experiences with us, I suppose, and that if you've had that experience of physical activity as being something that makes you hot and sweaty and something you don't particularly like doing, you don't want to pass that attitude on to young children. You want them to feel, obviously, that physical activity is fun and something that they enjoy doing. What are your kind of tips for educators on how to maybe come to see physical activity in that way themselves, and something that they pass on positive attitudes around?
Yeah, that's a great question, Maura. And it's something that I kind of think about a lot and talk about with people a lot. I mean, I know I hear so many people saying, like, defining themselves as sporty or not sporty. Do you know, like, I am a sporty person or I'm a not sporty person, or my family is sporty or my family's not sporty. Like, my family, they weren't sporty, but we were active. Do you know, like, we didn't play for teams. We weren't into training or anything, but we did still a lot of kind of physical activity. And I think sometimes it's being careful about the language we use and being conscious of what children are hearing. I think a lot of the time they hear terms like exercise, these real structured things, and it being something that you have to do. And, maybe their parents or adults talking about, I have to, I should exercise, I have to do this thing. And this kind of obligation around it, of this thing that I have to do for my health. And it's not a positive message. It's a real, like, once you don't have a choice about something, once someone is telling you to do it, like, we all know the things that we should be doing, but it doesn't help us to do them. So I think sometimes looking at our own perceptions of physical activity, like, we're very conscious of using terms like exercise, much prefer things like physical activity, movement, being active, using your body, those sorts of things. And I think for adults as well, really examining what your own perceptions are around physical activity. Do you think of exercise as something that you have to do, or as something that, is purely there because you want to lose weight, or, or what role does it play in your own life? How does it make you feel? And what are the things that make you feel good when you're doing it? And I think with children, in terms of trying to set like a good, be good role models and set good examples, is just finding those things that you like. So if it's going out for a walk, then brilliant, like, do that as many days as you can. Mix it up in whatever way you can. Maybe make it into a scavenger hunt, or like, figure out ways to kind of add on more to the things that you like. And then for children is, again, be careful about the language that we use, that it is, okay, it's not necessarily, okay, we have to do exercise now. It's good for our health, so we have to do exercise. It's, it's the opportunities for being active and moving our bodies. And, especially if it's, if you've been sitting a lot, it's really important to move your bodies and talk about how that makes you feel, and how it makes you feel energized, and how it makes it, like, how it's fun to play with our friends and things like that. We do a huge amount of work in the Irish Heart Foundation around kind of trying to raise awareness of the damage of sitting to health. It's one thing to do physical activity maybe once a day, maybe twice a week, whatever it is. But if you're sitting all the time, it completely outweighs the benefits of being active. So trying to break up seated time as well throughout the day. So whether it's in an early years childcare setting, if it's in a home, whatever it is, being really conscious of not limiting children to sitting for more than like an hour at a time, and trying to break up periods of sitting and do more active things in between that. We have a great resource for that. It's aimed at primary schools, but it's still appropriate for kind of younger children as well, called Busy Breaks. And it's a booklet just of really simple kind of 5-10 minute activities, little energizers that you can do to break up periods of sitting, or from moving, like transitioning from one activity to the other. So Busy Breaks are brilliant for that sort of thing. Just quick little movements. It's not necessarily we're going to do 45 minutes of exercise now. It's we're going to get active. We're going to, get our hearts pumping. And but no, I totally agree. There's a huge amount of talk now about, well, for a long time, about childhood obesity, and we need to get children moving. And I absolutely agree. We do. It is really important for children to be active for their current and their future health. But are we getting children active, or are we doing exercise to children? Like if we're making them run laps of the schoolyard and they hate it, as soon as they're not told to do that thing, they're not going to do it, and they're going to hate running. So we need to be really conscious of what the long-term kind of impact is, and what experience we're giving children of physical activity. Is it something they're being forced to do that they absolutely hate, or is it something that we are showing them how it feels good for our bodies and it's good for our health and it's an opportunity to do? So I think in terms of tips, I'd say like choices. You need to give children choices and listen to them as to what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, see what they're doing and what they thrive at doing, and figure out, different kind of challenges and different things that you can do with them.
Yeah, it really, it's more than in the here and now, isn't it? It's kind of about, the doing it now because it's the right thing to do, but also giving children the desire and the motivation and the disposition that this is something that they will bring with them, rather than something that they'll talk about it in 20 years
Absolutely.
time as something they hated doing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Like your current, like children's health now is setting their foundation for what their health is as adults. And a lot of the research, that kind of pointed towards fundamental movement skills and physical literacy was showing that adults who were more active, and as a result kind of had better sort of health outcomes, a lot of them performed better at those fundamental movement skills. So there is this kind of direct link between building all these skills in childhood, having opportunities to use them, and then finding the thing that you will stick with as an adult to be active and, to value your health. So all of this stuff, yeah, absolutely. It's setting the foundations for the rest of their lives, their health, their heart health, their enjoyment of physical activity.
And I think it kind of links back to what you were saying about the PARS program, is, that following the lead of the child rather than scheduling it. So having the affordances or provocations or whatever, indoors and outdoors, and having maybe plenty time outdoors, and then letting children use the various items in the way that they choose to.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm not for a moment saying that we shouldn't have structured activities. Like that's great as well, and to kind of teach the skills and do different activities, but also to be open to that. If you see that all of the children are doing something completely different, or they're, using things in completely different ways, to kind of be adaptable to go with that and see, oh, okay, they're thinking of something that I hadn't thought of. So let's change this game. Let's change this activity. Let's add these things in and see where it goes. Giving them that kind of, what are what are the affordances for them? What are they being kind of called towards? What's enjoyable for them? So yeah, so being open as an adult to kind of knowing that the children have a certain amount of expertise in this that we don't.
That's it. And maybe more agility and so on as well. So you mentioned about sitting, and I kind of said a minute ago about about coming back to older children. I suppose I'm very conscious with school age children, and they spend a lot of time in school, and a lot of that time by its nature is seated. So, in terms of primary school children coming to school age settings in the afternoon, Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that physical, those opportunities to be physically active in the afternoon, and that maybe the physical activity is more important than, dare I say it, the homework?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I'd love to start a campaign around that. Maybe we'll get together and start that one.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Bane of so many people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the after school setting. So the general kind of guidelines around physical activity is for 0 to 6 that it's 180 minutes of physical activity throughout the day. Now that's any type of physical activity. It's not necessarily like that gets you out of breath or that's, working quite hard. It's any sort of physical activity because younger children, they're developing that balance and the coordination, and every type of movement they do is really important. Now, from about kind of 6 to 18, it's the recommendation is 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity every day. So moderate to vigorous is kind of where your heart rate is increasing, it's beating faster, your breathing is getting a bit faster, but you can still hold a conversation. And then vigorous is working much harder. So it's hard to kind of keep a chat going. You have to kind of focus on your breathing. So it's the kind of more, intense physical activity that's really beneficial for your health overall. And that's kind of the one that's the recommendation, 60 minutes per day. So those 60 minutes can be broken down. It can be 5 minutes here, it can be 10 minutes there. And we used to kind of say 10 minutes, like in the industry, we would recommend 10 minutes of physical activity. But more recent research is really kind of pointing towards the benefits of like a minute here and 2 minutes there. So the World Health Organization, I think it was 2020 when they released their most recent kind of world guidelines, and they called it every minute counts. So it really is, any sort of activity is really beneficial. So in terms of after school, I'm sure there's plenty of children who might be getting a little bit of physical activity within school through PE or through extracurricular sports or things like that, and then might go to after school and then get picked up by the parents and then mightn't do any more sort of movement or activity throughout the day and then going to bed. So yeah, after school care is a really, really good opportunity for movement and also for play because like there is after in early years, there is that understanding of the importance of play. But I think once children get to kind of middle childhood, it's almost seen as the academic stuff is much more important now. Like they don't want to, you wouldn't want to concern yourself with play, but it's still so important. So in terms of getting moving, I think it's, the reducing the sitting is really important as well. Even in after school, that it's not just sitting at desks and kind of doing activities, but there is the opportunity for movement. So to be able to do kind of active things, so whether it's putting on music and everybody having a dance, or maybe trying to come up with a dance routine and teach each other, or everybody take a section or something like that. I'm a huge fan of obstacle courses in all shapes, forms, sizes. I think obstacle courses are brilliant because they're very adaptable. You can use literally anything. You can be going under a blanket, you can be hopping over a cone, you can use I also love like electrical tape or masking tape just for putting markings on the floor and making things, or outdoor large chalk. You can make a brilliant obstacle course just by writing out different things. So it could be, jump 3 times here, hop on 1 foot to here, then the red line, do a twirl, like it's just really creative stuff you can do with it. So if you have the space to do something like that, brilliant. That's something that you can give the children the ownership of. They can develop their own obstacle course. You can start with just a couple of things and then add stuff on. If it is a case that they do, that there is an opportunity to do something fun around like walking or running. So maybe it's going out for a walk, maybe it's turning it into a scavenger hunt. Maybe it's, finding 5 things that begin with a certain letter, or writing out different things to tick off. If they do enjoy kind of running, well, if that's something that they want to do, by all means, they could do laps or something like that, but not something to force on them as well. This is our opportunity to get some physical activity, so this is what we're going to do. And I think older children are, they're good at telling you what they do and don't like as well. So there is a certain amount of, like ask them. If they're not enjoying something, that can be really useful as well to kind of figure out what it is about it that they don't like, because it might be something, it mightn't be the activity itself, it might just be that it's outside and they want to be inside, or vice versa. So I think there's creative, fun little things you can do within after school. If you don't have the space, again, Busy Breaks Irish Heart Foundation program is a really good one. It's like developed for classrooms, so it is developed with that in mind, like having that limited space. So everything can be done sitting or standing, kind of at or near a desk. So that's a great one for after school. And we also have. So you can find all of the Irish Heart Foundation resources at irishheart.ie/schools. So we have the Busy Breaks program, that's all free. You can download it, you can print it. There's no paywall, there's no purchasing, it's all free. And there's also a section called Busy at Home. So this was activities and resources that we developed when schools were closed that could be kind of sent home as part of homeschooling work. So there's some really good kind of one-pager printable ideas in there around kind of like fun activities, quick kind of things that you can do that are absolutely appropriate for kind of after school and some for early years as well. So it's movement and mindfulness within those programs.
Great. Christina, thank you so much. So many simple, easy ideas there, like, you know, the chalk and the obstacle courses and so on. So that'll cover all the age ranges. So thank you so much for taking the time. As I say, great ideas there. And thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues, and talk to you the next time.